The lectionary sends us to Job this week. The book of Job, chapter 1, verses 1, and then chapter 2, verses 1 through 10. There was once a man in the land of Uz, whose name was Job. That man was blameless and upright, one who feared God and turned away from evil. One day, the heavenly beings came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan also came among them to present himself before the Lord. The Lord said to Satan, "Where have you come from?" Satan answered, "From going to and fro on the earth, and from walking up and down on it." The Lord said to Satan, "Have you considered my servant Job? There is no one like him on the earth, a blameless and upright man who fears God and turns away from evil. He still persists in his integrity, although you incited me against him to destroy him for no reason." Then Satan answered, "Skin for skin. All that people have they will give to save their lives. But stretch out your hand now and touch his bone and his flesh, and he will curse you to your face." The Lord said to Satan, "Very well, he is in your power. Only spare his life." So Satan went out from the presence of the Lord and inflicted loathsome sores on Job from the sole of his foot to the crown of his head. Job took a potsherd with which to scrape himself and sat among the ashes. Then his wife said to him, "Do you still persist in your integrity? Curse God and die." But he said to her, "You speak as any foolish woman would speak. Shall we receive the good at the hand of God and not receive the bad?" In all this, Job did not sin with his lips. May the hearing of these words add insight and blessing. I love Job. One of my favorite books in the Bible. I love Job. It is so hard and difficult, really. I love Job. We often come to Job. Maybe you have too. Most people, we tend to approach Job. We go to Job looking for answers to what, in the theological world, we would say theodicy. Right? The suffering of, how to explain suffering. Or, in a simpler way, why do good things happen to bad people? Right? Why? Haven't you ever wondered? Most of us do. Why do good things happen to bad people? But really, if we were to be really honest, probably our more burning question is, why do bad things happen to good people? Why do good things happen to good people? Why do bad things happen to good people? But the reverse of that is really, probably, if we were to be really honest, is we want to know, why do good things happen to bad people? Why do some suffer? Some, if they seem innocent and virtuous and good people, suffering when bad people seem to profit and do so well and seem blessed. Where is God in all of this? So we go to Job often looking for that. We try to find some of those answers in Job. Stop looking. They aren't there. It's not really what Job is about. Job is not really a book about Job. I know that doesn't make sense. It's Job. It is about Job, right? It's his life. But really, at the heart of Job, it's really about God. It's a book about God. Who is God? What is our relationship with God? What should our relationship to God be? You know, in James, we've been looking for weeks at the letter of James, and James' focus is about how we relate to one another as followers and people of God.
Followers of Jesus, people of God. Job really invites us to look at and examine God and our relationship to God. Here's Job. Job is a righteous, good guy. I mean, he's a good guy, right? Right from the beginning, we get that. Job has done nothing wrong. Job's a good guy. He has integrity. He cares for his family. He cares for the people who work for him. He's a good guy. He's done nothing wrong. And here's this little encounter. Now, this is really interesting to me. There's this little encounter. I mean, this little encounter with God and the heavenly beings, the gathering of the heavenly beings. Isn't that interesting? That suggests that they're God's consulting with heavenly beings. Like there's all these other, and Satan comes along, and boy, there's a scary word, Satan. We don't like this Satan. But I just need to let you know that that's a translation that we kind of, in our minds, and in a lot of our in our Bibles, it gets translated as Satan, capital S, and that triggers in your mind probably little man with the red horns and tail and cute little Halloween costume. But that's not really what it is meant to. That's not really what it means in the writing, in the Hebrew, its original language. It really would be more of a small s. And Satan is just simply another word for, it's the accuser, or it's a heavenly being. It can be human or heavenly being, and it's known as the accuser. So we can assume that Satan in this is part of the council, the heavenly council here, and that his role is to sort of walk the earth and search out for those who are simply, who are not following, not living righteous lives with integrity in God's way. That's what Satan is about. He's not just a little demon running around to want to cause harm. But so when God says to the accuser, have you considered Job, my servant Job? Because earlier, the piece that gets skipped in this is that that Satan's already said, Job, strike him. Nobody, there is no human on earth that's going to be true to you when they get pressure, when you start hurting them, when bad things start happening. Nobody can withstand that. Nobody's going to stand true. Nobody's going to fear God, fear and love God. God says, no. Have you considered my servant? Consider Job. Job's different. Not Job. And then God does this really disturbing thing, doesn't God? God gives Satan permission to cause misery. I mean, it's horrible. What happens to Job is horrible. This is only the beginning. This is just the beginning. More is coming. Woo! No spoiler alerts, but this is just the beginning, and it's bad enough that he gets struck. His body is covered with, his whole body, head to toe, from scalp to his toe. I had chicken pox once as a kid, and I got the pox on my head. That was so miserable. I mean, just covered everywhere. It's miserable. Job is miserable. And he just picks up it's a little scraper, it's a little piece of thing to scratch his skin with, just pots hurt, he just picks it up, and he drags himself out to the city limits, probably where the ashes are, a dung heap is what, and he sits on it, just sits there, scraping himself. We don't hear him speak, and his wife comes and says this horrible thing. It sounds horrible, doesn't it? Like, why don't you just curse God already and die? That's the the kind of spouse I want. Just die. Curse God and die. Because really, cursing God would be a form of death in that, right? To just... Job says no. No, do we take the good, and we can take the good, we receive all the goodness of God, but we're not willing to receive the bad? This is what Job is about, really. What is our relationship with God? Are we only interested in a God who blesses people with all the monetary things and with just blessedness? Is that the only value God has? Is that it? If things are going bad, if things are tough, God doesn't exist, but when things are good, wow, praise God. That's really the question. Or can we understand something deeper? Can we hold to a truth that is beyond that? That God isn't about rewarding people and causing harm to people. God is more centered somewhere else. God is with us in our suffering. God's on the dung heap with us. God is within us. This has been a really hard week. This has been a hard week. A lot of people are really hurting in our world, in our country right now. Women especially. Men too. I mean, people are hurting. Regardless of where you fall on the political scale or what you think about the events that have unfolded, you have to know people are suffering and hurt. People have been triggered. People don't feel listened to or heard. They're suffering. Good people are suffering. This is not the time to curse God and die. This is not the time to give up and to believe that God is only with us in our joys and in our abundance, but that God is with us in our suffering. That's the lesson Job can teach us. And Job has something powerful to say. So let me begin. Ultimately, Job will persevere, and abundance and joy will return to him. But in the suffering, God is with us. God knows us. God hears us. God sees us. God trusts us. Even when there are things we cannot understand and questions we cannot answer, like why bad things happen to good people. Trust God and be there for one another.